Welcome to Alien Love Chronicles, where love defies gravity and destiny spans across galaxies. In today's story, a man crashes onto a planet with two suns and finds not death, but a love that rewrites fate. Mysterious relics, ancient prophecies, and forbidden feelings await. You won't believe where this journey ends. Before we begin, please give this video a like, share it, and subscribe. Help us reach 1,000 followers. Your support inspires us to create even more epic, emotional sci-fi love stories. Now buckle up, because not all crashes are accidents. Some are where everything truly begins. The first thing Lucas Hale felt was weight, not pain, not fear, just gravity. A brutal, crushing force pinning his chest to the floor of the broken cockpit. Every breath scraped against his ribs like sandpaper. Sparks crackled above him. Somewhere, metal groaned and popped under strain. Smoke slithered through the cracked viewport, curling like a serpent trying to find its way inside. And beyond it, beyond the shattered glass and fractured steel, the sky burned with a color he had no name for. Lucas opened his eyes slowly, blinking past blood and sweat. Overhead, two suns blazed in tandem across the sky. One burned gold, the other deep violet. Together, they cast a strange, shivering light that rippled across the landscape in metallic hues. Shadows bled in lavender. Highlights pulsed with amber. The world outside seemed suspended between fire and dream. He coughed hard, the sound dry and ragged. His tongue tasted of copper and ozone. "Status check," he mumbled, more instinct than command. His suit gave a half-dead chirp, barely holding power. Internal diagnostics flashed red. Bones likely fractured. Lungs exposed to unknown atmosphere. Life expectancy uncertain. Outside the twisted remains of his escape pod, the jungle pulsed. He dragged himself forward, metal screeching beneath him. Every motion was agony. Gravity here wasn't like Earth's. It was heavier, denser. Like the very air tried to drag you down into the soil. His muscles strained under twice their normal load, his bones aching like they'd been hollowed out and filled with lead. Still, he moved. 1 inch at a time, because that's what survivors did. When he finally tumbled from the hatch onto the alien ground, he lay there for a long moment, just breathing. Around him, the jungle shimmered. Not with heat, but with life. Trees with bark like molten bronze stretched high above, their leaves translucent and veined with veins of glowing blue. Some plants pulsed faintly, emitting their own soft light, phosphorescent in nature, yet oddly rhythmic, as if the jungle breathed in sync with some great unseen heart. Insects buzzed overhead, their wings catching the twin sunlight like flakes of silver. They darted and flickered through the trees like falling stars. The ground beneath him was dark and soft, but with a strange magnetic pull. Every time Lucas tried to shift position, it was like something tugged at his boots, mild but persistent, as though the planet wasn't sure if it wanted him here or not. "Pharos," he whispered hoarsely. That was the last thing his nav system had confirmed before the crash. A planet off the standard charts, unmapped, uncolonized. The kind of place you didn't end up on unless something had gone very, very wrong. And something had. He sat up slowly, cringing as his back screamed in protest. His chest plate was dented inward. Sparks popped along his shoulder where his communicator used to be. He reached up, adjusting the cracked helmet, and froze. Across the clearing, barely visible through the haze and shimmering foliage, stood a figure. Not human. It was massive. At least 10 feet tall at the shoulder, its form sleek and angular, like a panther sculpted from obsidian and glass. The light refracted strangely off its surface, making it seem half invisible at the edges. Eyes, if that's what they were, glowed faintly orange in its crystalline face. It didn't move. It only watched. Lucas's breath caught. He didn't dare reach for the emergency flare clipped to his belt. It was clear this creature wasn't attacking. Yet. He stayed frozen, muscles coiled. But then, the creature slowly stepped back into the brush, vanishing without a sound. Gone, as if it had only come to look. He was still staring at the spot where it disappeared when a voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You don't belong here, off-worlder." Lucas turned his head, and for a second, he thought maybe the fall had killed him after all, that this was some hallucination, a final mirage conjured by a dying brain. She stood on a high rock ledge, framed by the twin suns. A woman, but clearly not human. Her skin shimmered with the color of forged bronze, her eyes glowing gold with a fierce, inhuman intensity. Long braids of silver-black hair were tied back from a face that was both sharp and elegant, warrior-like and alien. She wore tight leather-like armor, lined with scales that shifted with her every move, and she held a long, curved weapon, part blade, part spear, tipped with a crystalline edge that caught the sunlight and scattered it into dancing fragments across the clearing. Lucas tried to rise, but his legs buckled beneath him. He fell again, groaning. The woman didn't move from her perch, but her gaze narrowed, curious, almost annoyed. "You crash from the sky, wake the deep one with your noise, and now you lie bleeding in our sacred grove. You really are as fragile as they say." Lucas coughed again, pushing himself upright. "I've had worse landings." The words tasted like smoke and blood in his mouth. She tilted her head slightly. The spear twirled in her hand with practiced ease. Her eyes dropped to something around his neck. Lucas looked down. The chain was cracked, the clasp bent, but the small pendant, 2 silver rings intertwined, still glinted faintly against his scorched chestplate. The woman went still. Her expression changed. Something flickered in her gaze. Recognition, maybe. Or disbelief. She stepped down from the ledge, slow, deliberate. "Where did you get that symbol?" she asked. Lucas touched the pendant. It was a gift from his daughter. Something she'd made for him before he left Earth. Just 2 simple circles, one large, one small, woven together from cheap metal and childlike love. "It's nothing, just a keepsake." But the woman didn't look convinced. She came closer, her eyes never leaving the pendant. "That is not nothing," she said quietly. "That is the sign of the 2 suns, the symbol of the ancients. It hasn't been seen for generations." Lucas stared at her, heart pounding. And somewhere deep in the jungle, far behind them, the obsidian beast let out a long, low call, less like a roar, and more like a warning. Something had changed. And Lucas Hale had just stepped into a story written long before he was ever born. The first drop sizzled as it hit the edge of a metal shard beside Lucas's boot. He didn't notice it at first. His mind was still spinning from the encounter with the obsidian creature and the woman who had descended from the rock ledge like a judgment made flesh. But then came the second drop, and the third. The air began to hiss, subtly at first, like water on a hot pan. Around them, leaves curled in on themselves. Thin streaks of smoke rose from branches overhead. The acidic rain had begun to fall. Riven reacted first. She moved like someone who had done this 100 times before. Grabbing Lucas's arm, she yanked him toward the trees, her voice sharp but focused. Her golden eyes flicked across the horizon. She wasn't looking for cover. She already knew where it was. Her pace was urgent, not frantic. She moved with the purpose of someone used to surviving. They ran through the shimmering forest, dodging roots that throbbed with a pulse-like rhythm, ducking under vines that twitched at their presence. The rain intensified, droplets hissing violently as they landed on exposed surfaces. One drop struck Lucas's sleeve. Fabric from Earth meant to withstand vacuum and radiation, but it burned a neat hole through the outer layer in seconds. He said nothing, only kept pace. There was no time for awe now. The mouth of the cave emerged from behind a curtain of hanging foliage, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. It gaped like a wound in the side of the cliff, shadowy and cold. Riven ducked inside first. Lucas followed, stumbling slightly as he crossed the threshold. Instantly, the hissing of the acid rain dulled, muffled by stone and distance. Inside, the air was cooler, damp, and scented faintly of minerals and something older, something forgotten. The walls of the cavern glowed faintly with bioluminescent moss, casting a gentle green-blue radiance. It wasn't enough to see clearly, but it was enough to move. As his eyes adjusted, Lucas realized that this was no ordinary cave. The symmetry of the walls, the clean angles carved into the stone, the precise placement of glyphs, it all pointed to intelligence, to design. This place had been made. Riven stood still, her silhouette frozen. Her posture changed, no longer that of a warrior, but of someone trespassing. Her fingers brushed lightly over a low stone altar near the entrance. She didn't speak, but Lucas saw the way her shoulders tensed, the way her hand lingered on a carved pattern etched deep into the surface. Her face, usually unreadable, was shadowed with something else now. Memory. Or maybe guilt. He moved deeper into the cave, running his fingers along the wall. The glyphs were old, worn down by centuries, but still legible. They formed spirals, intersecting circles and strange branching lines. One symbol, etched larger than the rest, caught his eye. 2 rings intertwined. The exact shape of the pendant hanging at his chest. His breath caught. Riven's voice was low behind him. "We were never supposed to come here. This place is forbidden." He turned to face her, confused. She stepped forward, her expression troubled, eyes flicking from the symbol on the wall to the necklace at his chest. "My people call this the Hall of Echoes," she said. "Our oldest stories say it was built by the ancients, beings who came from the stars before even the first Thal tribes. The elders believe this place carries echoes of their knowledge, their warnings. Others think it's cursed." Lucas looked back at the wall. "Then why bring me here?" She hesitated. "Because the rain would have killed you, and because of that." She pointed to the pendant. Before he could reply, the stone beneath his feet pulsed. Faintly, like a heartbeat. Then again. The air seemed to shift, becoming denser, filled with static energy. The glyphs along the wall began to glow, one by one, lines of golden light crawling outward from the symbol of the twin rings. Lucas stumbled back instinctively. The room responded to him. From the far side of the chamber, a circular platform rose silently from the floor, decades of dust sliding away as if repelled by invisible force. A structure like a console emerged, shaped not with buttons or levers, but with grooves and hollows that looked disturbingly organic. It pulsed once, waiting. Riven stepped forward, her spear drawn. "It's waking up." Lucas felt a strange compulsion, a pull in his chest like gravity had shifted again, this time toward the console. Without understanding why, he reached out and placed his hand into the central recess. Light bloomed. From the console, a beam of luminous energy projected into the air, coalescing into a floating figure, humanoid, but elongated, ethereal. Its features were smooth, almost mask-like, with twin orbs of white fire for eyes. Glyphs danced across its translucent form, cycling in slow patterns that seemed to whisper meaning just beyond comprehension. Riven's breath hitched. That's a memory construct." The projection turned its gaze on Lucas, and though it had no mouth, it spoke. Its voice not in words, but in impressions. Images burned directly into the mind. A starship. A voyage. The world of Pharos before it was Pharos. Twin suns rising over seas of glass. 2 peoples reaching out across impossible distance, human and other. A covenant. A symbol. The intertwined rings. Lucas staggered back, gasping. The projection flickered, then receded into the console, its message delivered. The glyphs slowly dimmed. Silence returned to the chamber. Riven looked at him with something deeper than suspicion now. Fear. Wonder. "Only a Thal should be able to activate the hall," she whispered. "Only someone with blood of the ancients." Lucas's mind spun. Nothing made sense. And yet, it did. The dreams he'd had as a child, the connection he'd felt to the stars, the pendant Emma had made for him, the symbol she'd drawn without ever being told. He clutched it now, breathing hard. "What am I?" he whispered. But Riven had no answer. Outside, the acid rain poured harder, cloaking the world in steam and silence. And inside the forbidden cave, fate had already begun to stir. They left the ancient cave in silence, each step heavy with unspoken questions. The jungle was quieter now, as if the very world held its breath after the awakening of something ancient. Riven walked ahead, her movements precise, yet slower than before. Her golden eyes no longer scanned just for threats. They flicked back toward Lucas more often, with something he couldn't quite read. The rain had passed, but the sky remained hazed with purples and ochres as the twin suns leaned toward the horizon. Pharos shimmered under the dimming light, the leaves of metal-veined trees fluttering as if whispering secrets between themselves. The soft hum of distant insect wings filled the air, and the jungle floor pulsed faintly beneath Lucas's boots, still charged with the echo of what they had just seen. They were making their way down a narrow ravine when the stillness shattered. A scream, not loud but sharp, cut through the air like a blade. Riven froze, hand going to her weapon instantly. The sound came again, this time accompanied by a rustle of foliage and the unmistakable sound of small feet scrambling through undergrowth. Lucas saw her posture change, panic, not fear. She bolted toward the sound faster than he'd ever seen her move. He followed without question, heart pounding. They found the girl moments later, entangled near the base of a spiraling carnivorous plant that resembled a coiled serpent. Its surface glistened with iridescent mucus, and from its open core extended several thick tendrils, each tipped with a soft-looking suction disc lined with needle-thin barbs. The tendrils had wrapped around her ankle and thigh, pulling her toward its gaping center. "Liana!" Riven shouted, but the plant didn't flinch. Lucas didn't hesitate. He dove forward, skidding on the damp soil and grabbing the base of one tendril. The suction pulled hard against his grip, the barbs trying to dig through the fabric of his sleeve. Gritting his teeth, he yanked hard, using his full body weight to rip the vine loose from the child. Another tendril snapped toward him, coiling around his arm like a snake. He reached for his belt, pulling a dull survival blade and plunging it into the pulsing stalk of the plant. A high-pitched wail erupted from its core as it convulsed violently, retracting its tendrils with a squelch and leaving behind a cloud of musky steam. Lucas stumbled back, breathing hard, his skin already reddening from the contact. The girl clung to Riven now, trembling but alive. She couldn't have been more than 10, slender, with dark bronze skin that shimmered faintly in the light, her eyes a strange hue, somewhere between Riven's molten gold and something cooler, like polished silver. "She's your family?" Lucas asked, still catching his breath. Riven nodded slowly, crouching to examine the girl's wounds. "My brother's daughter," she said. "She wasn't supposed to be this far out alone." Liana looked at Lucas, her gaze steady, despite the tremble in her limbs. "You're the one from the cave," she said softly. "The one the light followed." Lucas blinked. "I guess I am." "You came from the sky," she said with a small, knowing smile. "My grandfather said someone like you would come. He called you the Man of Light." Lucas glanced at Riven, who didn't return his look. She was focused on applying a dark salve to the girl's leg. Later, as they made camp in a small clearing, Liana stayed close to Lucas, despite Riven's subtle attempts to keep her near. The child seemed drawn to him, her trust immediate and unwavering, as though she sensed something more in him than just the man with calloused hands and a haunted past. Under the quiet of the forest canopy, she spoke of things in whispers, how she didn't belong fully to any tribe, how some of the older children in her village whispered behind her back, called her split blood, how the Sakar, the zealots who believed in blood purity and sacred order, hunted those like her, believing them abominations born of defiance. Lucas listened, saying little, but his chest ached with every word. He saw flashes of Emma, his daughter, in this brave little girl who bore the weight of exclusion with quiet grace. Her eyes held the same light, the same searching curiosity. Riven said nothing for a long time, only watching them. When Liana finally fell asleep curled beside him, head resting against his thigh, Riven approached. "You shouldn't let her get attached," she said quietly. He looked up. "Maybe she needs to. She's different. Special. That makes her a target." "So was my daughter," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. She never had a chance. Riven hesitated, something flickering across her features. Then she sat beside him, eyes on the dying embers of the fire. "She calls you the man of light," she murmured. "And you?" he asked, unsure if he even wanted an answer. She didn't look at him, but her voice softened, almost too quiet for the wind to carry. "I don't know what to call someone who makes forbidden things feel possible." They sat in silence as Pharos' twin moons began to rise, casting silver light across the clearing, and the shadows of what was coming stretched just a little closer. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm neither of them expected. Each morning, they woke before the twin suns crested the jagged horizon. Riven led them along forgotten paths cloaked in vines and metallic moss, the earth humming faintly beneath their boots. Lucas learned quickly to move like her, low, fluid, mindful of Pharos' strange gravity and the creatures lurking beneath its radiant surface. Each evening, they stopped just long enough to rest, to eat, to share a few words in the dim violet twilight as Liana drifted into sleep nearby. And in that quiet, between breaths, between glances, something began to grow. Not the sudden, sweeping love of old Earth romance stories. This was slower, wary. It grew from shared silences, from the way she watched him teach Liana to tie a slipknot using jungle reeds, from how he learned to read the subtle shift in her posture that meant danger was near, from the moment she handed him a knife without speaking, and he understood it wasn't a gesture of trust, but of need. He never touched her hand, but sometimes, their fingers brushed when passing a piece of dried root. He never spoke the words aloud, but once when she returned from scouting, bloodied but alive, his eyes had burned with more than just concern. And Riven, who had fought monsters twice her size, who had stared down exiles and rebels, could not hold his gaze for more than a few seconds. The boundary between them was there, invisible, but taut as a drawn bowstring. One night, as they camped beneath the canopy of singing branches, with Liana asleep under the wing of a creature that had adopted them as its pack, Lucas woke to find Riven sitting apart from the fire, her back to the stars, her shoulders bare beneath the thin cloak she wore. The night air was cooler than usual, the breeze carrying a faint trace of sea salt from some distant, unseen ocean. He joined her in silence. For a while, neither spoke. Then, in a voice low and steady, she said, "I was 12 when I took the blood vow." Lucas didn't respond immediately. He knew enough now to recognize when she was peeling back a layer that cost her something. "My people have ancient laws," she continued, eyes fixed on a distant point in the dark. "Some are written in stone, others passed from mother to daughter. The vow is among the oldest. No warrior of Thal may bond with someone not of our kind. No love, no offspring, no oath deeper than the one sworn to the tribe. To break it is to be unmade." She turned to face him. Even in the faint firelight, her golden eyes held a storm. "If I disobey, my name is erased from the songs of my people. I am cast out. When I die, my spirit won't return to the ancestors. It will drift, forgotten, alone." Lucas looked at her, and for the first time, he saw how tightly she held herself, not with pride, but with necessity. Her strength was armor, not peace. He didn't move to touch her, didn't say anything foolish. Instead, he simply met her gaze with the quiet steadiness that had carried him through every loss, every fall. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I didn't come here for this. I don't even know what this is." She blinked, startled. "But I know I'd fight for you," he added. "Even if you never choose me. Even if all I ever do is walk beside you until the stars forget our names." Riven turned away then, but not in rejection. Her breath caught just once, barely audible. For a warrior raised in steel and silence, it was the closest thing to breaking. They sat like that until the moons rose, casting long silver lines through the trees. She didn't answer him, but she didn't leave his side either. And in the watching silence of Pharos, something shifted. Not in defiance, not in surrender, but in quiet defiance of the weight they both carried. The jungle rustled. The fire crackled low. And the choice neither of them could yet name had already begun to make itself. The village came into view just as the sky split into molten gold and deep crimson, the twin suns of Pharos descending behind distant ridges. From a distance, everything looked still. Too still. Riven slowed her pace, her body tensing. The usual buzz of communal life, the laughter of children, the rhythmic pounding of food preparation, the chiming of wind-hung stones, was gone. Silence had settled like a veil over the settlement. Lucas felt it too, an unease that curled in the pit of his stomach. Then the first plume of smoke twisted into the air. They broke into a run. By the time they reached the outer perimeter, the devastation was clear. Homes made of woven reed and fossilized bone had been torn apart. The gardens, carefully tended for generations, lay trampled, their life-giving crops shredded beneath armored boots. Fires burned unchecked in the eastern quarter, sending oily black smoke into the twilight. Corpses lay scattered, some Thal, some Sakar. The battle had already begun, and ended. And yet, something in the air whispered that the true storm had not yet arrived. They found survivors, wounded warriors huddled behind overturned stone slabs, elders tending to the injured with trembling hands. One young scout, his face streaked with soot and blood, gasped when he saw Riven. "They knew," he said hoarsely. "They knew where to strike. Our blind corners, the hidden gates. Someone told them." Riven's jaw tightened. "Who?" The boy hesitated. It was Marcus. Lucas recognized the name. A fellow warrior, one who had walked beside Riven in earlier patrols, strong, charismatic, and, if the whispers were true, once her closest companion. "He unlocked the southern gate himself," the scout said. "I saw him. He was smiling." Riven didn't speak. Her entire body had gone rigid, and her eyes, those fierce golden eyes, seemed to burn. The whistle of marching feet echoed before anyone could respond. From the central clearing, a line of Sakar warriors emerged in formation, disciplined, grim, their black and silver armor reflecting firelight. And at their head stood a man who should not have been alive. Kale. His presence hit Riven like a hammer to the chest. He looked older now, harder. The boyish charm she once knew had been forged into something cold and sharp. His face bore a jagged scar across one cheek, and his dark hair had been tied into ceremonial knots of the Sakar warlords. But it was the eyes that struck her most, once warm, now icy with conviction. He raised a hand, signaling his soldiers to halt. "Riven," he said, his voice carrying across the broken village. "I had hoped to see you again before the end." She stepped forward slowly, a spear still in her hand. "Kale, we thought you died in the Red Canyons." "I did," he replied, his voice steady. "The man I was, the one who believed in compromise, in unity through diplomacy, he died that day. The Sakar found me, saved me, showed me the truth." His gaze swept over the survivors cowering in the shadows. "Pharos is weak, splintered. The old ways keep us small, tribal, vulnerable, but united. Under one banner, one law, we could rise." "By slaughtering the innocent," she demanded. "By removing what slows us down. The Thal cling to traditions, to emotion. You'd rather die than evolve." Lucas had moved beside her now, saying nothing. He could feel the tension between them, the sharp edge of history and heartbreak. But he didn't speak. He didn't reach for her. He stood still, a quiet wall of presence at her side. Kyle noticed. His eyes narrowed. "So, this is the outsider." Riven didn't flinch. "His name is Lucas." "I expected more," Kyle said, almost conversational. "You used to dream bigger." Riven's voice was ice. "I dream of a world where children don't bleed in their own gardens." Kale smiled. "Then join me. I don't want to destroy the Thal. Not completely. I want you beside me, Riven. You know this world better than anyone. Lead with me. Help me build something stronger." The moment hung between them like a sword suspended over flame. Lucas's heart pounded, but he said nothing. Riven's hand tightened on her spear, Her breath came slow and deep. "I mourned you," she said softly. "I wept at your grave. I kept your name in the warrior songs. But the man I loved would never burn his own people. He died. You're just the bones that were left." Something flickered in Cale's eyes. Regret, perhaps, but it passed. "So be it," he said. "When the main host arrives, the rest of your village will fall. But you, Riven, I will give you one more chance. Don't waste it." He turned and walked back toward the line of soldiers. Riven stood motionless as they disappeared into the jungle's edge. Only when the last echo of marching faded did she speak. "I loved him once," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Lucas finally spoke, his voice low. "You don't have to explain." "I do," she replied, eyes on the distance, "because I don't think I hate him. And I should." The firelight cast her face in gold and shadow. In that moment, Lucas didn't see a warrior or a rebel or a lover torn between past and future. He saw someone standing at the edge of everything she believed in, and having to choose which way to fall. And he knew. Whatever came next, he wouldn't let her fall alone. The battlefield was chaos. Smoke curled through the fractured sky, illuminated in twin glows of violet and gold as Pharos' suns dipped low behind jagged cliffs. The air smelled of burning sap and blood, both red and indigo. Screams echoed in every direction, both human and not. The jungle trembled under the force of war. Lucas fought like a man who had already lost everything once and refused to do so again. Every strike he threw carried not just strength, but memory. Of Earth. Of a family buried in silence. Of a second chance he never thought he deserved. His body ached. His breath came ragged. But he never faltered. Kale was a whirlwind of destruction, commanding his Sakar forces with ruthless precision, driving them toward the heart of the village. His armor gleamed black and cruel, etched with symbols that pulsed faintly with energy. At his side, a brutal weapon hummed, a scythe forged from some dark alloy, singing with each arc it sliced through the air. And then, Kale saw Lucas. Their gazes locked across the flames and ruin. Kale broke away from his guards without hesitation, cutting a path through the defenders like a storm. Lucas met him head-on. The clash was thunder, steel against will, earthborn strength against Pharosian fury. Sparks flew from the impact of weapons. For a moment, it was as if time folded around them, two men shaped by the same woman, standing on opposite ends of her heart. Lucas landed a hit to Kale's jaw that sent the warlord staggering. Kale recovered quickly, growling, "You don't belong here." But Lucas didn't answer. He didn't need to. His presence, his defiance, his refusal to die quietly, those were answer enough. Kale's next swing was vicious, aimed to cleave Lucas open at the ribs. He ducked just in time but stumbled, off balance, exposed, and Kale raised his blade for the killing blow. That was when the creature intervened. Solon, Riven's loyal companion, the towering beast of sinew and crystal that had followed her since she was a child, lunged from the side with impossible speed. Its massive body collided with Kale's, knocking him back, claws tearing through armor, fangs snapping at his exposed shoulder. But Kale reacted too fast. He plunged his blade deep into Solon's side. The scream that followed wasn't just animal. It was something ancient, something sacred. Solon crumpled to the ground, blood gushing in glowing rivulets across the scorched earth. Its breathing slowed, each inhale shallower than the last. Lucas crawled toward it, already knowing what he'd find. Riven was there before him. She dropped to her knees, hands shaking as she touched Solon's fur, blood pooling beneath her. She pressed her forehead to its side, whispering words in the old tongue, the language of her tribe's bond with the natural world. And then it happened. Solon's body, still broken, began to glow. From its chest, a soft light spread outward, forming a radiant pattern in the dust and blood. Twin circles, intertwined. The same symbol etched into Lucas's pendant. The same one carved into the ancient cave wall. The sign of the prophecy. The sign of the two suns. The battlefield paused. Even Kale hesitated. Riven looked up, tears tracking down her dirt-streaked cheeks. Her voice cracked as she turned to Lucas, eyes wide and full of grief and clarity all at once. "I lost Kale to his hatred," she said. "I couldn't save him. But I won't lose you too. I can't." Lucas knelt beside her, touching Solan's cooling shoulder. Something shifted in him. A thread pulling tight. He reached into the pouch at his hip and pulled free the ancient key, recovered from the cave where they first took shelter. The one that had pulsed to his DNA alone. Behind enemy lines, Kale's forces had constructed a generator, a relic of stolen technology capable of reshaping Pharos' magnetic field, forcing compliance through environmental collapse, a weapon disguised as salvation. The generator pulsed faintly in the near distance, guarded by twisted machines that hummed with Sakar power. Lucas stared at it. The key in his hand glowed softly. If he used it now, inserted it into the core, he could override Kale's control. Shut down the entire system. Stop the invasion before it spread across Pharos. But there was a cost. The energy surge required would burn out every satellite relay for kilometers. The distress beacon, the one he'd repaired and hidden, would be destroyed. His chance of ever returning to Earth, of going home, would vanish. His eyes flicked toward the jungle, where the Earth Alliance might one day come searching. Then to Riven, crouched over Solan's body, her face still wet with tears. And to Liana, in the arms of a fleeing elder, watching with wide, terrified eyes. This was his home now. Lucas stood. With purposeful strides, he pushed through the wreckage and smoke toward the generator, ignoring the shouts behind him. He dodged incoming fire, sprinting between broken walls and fallen warriors. Kale saw him and gave chase, but too late. Lucas reached the generator. He pressed the key into the slot. The machine shuddered. A pulse of white light shot skyward, cutting through the clouds like a blade. Circuits exploded. Towers collapsed. The weaponized field destabilized and vanished in a shockwave that sent Kale sprawling. And far above, the last flickering signal from the earthbound beacon died with a whisper. Lucas fell to one knee, breathing hard. Behind him, Riven ran to him, falling into his arms. "You didn't have to," she said, voice trembling. "I did," he replied. "Because I already found what I was looking for." She held him tighter, and in the smoky, fractured light of Pharos' twin suns, the symbol of the two rings still glowed faintly in the dust beside Solan's resting place. The prophecy had been fulfilled, not with conquest, but with choice. Not with power, but with love. The war was over. Pharos, wounded but unbroken, began to breathe again beneath the glow of its twin suns. Smoke no longer curled in violent spirals over broken stone but drifted lazily, fading into skies of lavender and gold. The village had been scarred, yet it still stood, its people alive, defiant, and changed forever. In the days that followed, they rebuilt not just homes, but beliefs. What had once been myth, whispered only in sacred chambers, now lived and breathed among them. Lucas Hale, the stranger from the stars, was no longer an outsider. He had become something more. He was the one spoken of in the ancient lines carved into the stone of the forbidden cave. The one who fell between two suns. The bearer of the twin-ringed pendant. The traveler who would choose not to return. They called him Veil Torin in the old tongue. The one who remained. He never asked for reverence. He shied away from the ceremonies, the songs, the stories etched into new walls in his honor. But when the tribal council approached him, asking him to lead the next generation in the ways of both Earth and Pharos, he said yes. Not because he believed he was chosen, but because he finally believed he belonged. He and Riven built a life on the edge of the jungle, where crystal-rooted trees grew beside the crops Lucas helped cultivate. The house was half carved from stone, half grown from the vines of Thal. It overlooked the valley where Solan had fallen, a place now honored in silence and adorned with the symbol of the two suns carved into an ancient obsidian slab. Liana lived with them, her laughter returning slowly, like spring after a long shadow. Her nickname for him, the man from the light, never faded. When she asked questions about Earth, Lucas answered with a smile that carried both wonder and ache. And in time, their family grew. 2 children, Nolan and Alira. Not entirely of Earth, not wholly of Pharos, but something new. Their skin shimmered with a faint violet glow, the subtle merging of pale and azure. Their eyes, golden like their mother's, held the quiet fire of suns caught at dawn. Nolan was fierce and protective, like Riven. Alira, thoughtful and curious, inherited her father's love of knowledge. They learned from both worlds. Lucas taught them physics, balance, how to calculate trajectory and tension from scrap wood and metal. Riven taught them to track by listening to silence, to read wind patterns, to hear the difference between a bird's song and a predator's whisper. Around the fire each evening, they asked for stories, and he gave them stories. He spoke of Earth, of oceans so wide they swallowed the horizon, of towers that pierced clouds, of thunder that danced with lightning across cities asleep. He told them about gravity that made you forget your weight, and about a world that forgot its soul chasing progress. But always, he came back to Pharos. He told them about his fall, how he had crashed into a jungle that wanted him dead, how a beast had spared him, how a woman with golden eyes had looked at him like a stranger, then a threat, then something more. He told them about Solon, who had given everything without hesitation, and about the moment he chose to destroy the only hope of returning home. Because his home had changed. Outside the village, the stone of the old prophecy cave had been carefully preserved. The markings once seen as metaphor now stood as living testament. Beside them, a new symbol was added, the twin rings, etched deeply, freshly, glowing faintly when touched by sunlight. It wasn't worship. It was memory. A reminder that once, a man had fallen from the sky, and chosen to rise not as a savior, but as a father, a protector, a bridge between 2 worlds. Seasons passed. The nomads who followed Kale's visions splintered and fell silent, their zeal swallowed by the quiet resilience of those they tried to destroy. Villages once isolated began to connect, guided by principles born from Earth and Pharos alike. Knowledge became a weapon of peace. Old songs found new verses. Children grew up bilingual, bicultural, brave. And Lucas grew older. Lines carved paths across his face. His hands, still strong, bore the calluses of 2 lives. His hair grayed under the constant gaze of twin suns. But his eyes remained steady. And when he sat among his grandchildren, surrounded by firelight and the sweet scent of night blooms, he spoke with the same voice that once echoed through falling wreckage. One evening, as the children gathered close, Nolan crawled into his lap, fingering the twin ring pendant that now hung from Riven's neck, a little dull with time but still whole. "Grandfather," the boy said, "did you really fall from the sky?" Lucas smiled. He looked up, letting the glow of the twin suns cast their gentle light across the horizon. "I did," he said, voice low and steady. "But it wasn't a fall. Not really." He glanced at Riven, still fierce, still radiant, seated beside him, her spear resting across her knees. "It was a landing, and it was exactly where I was meant to be." The fire crackled, the jungle whispered, and the stars above, distant and unknowing, blinked their cold approval. The man from Earth had found his home, and Pharos, the planet with 2 suns, had gained its legend. And that was the story of a man who fell from the stars and chose not to return. He gave up everything, his home, his planet, his past, all for a future built with love, born in fire, and sealed beneath twin suns. The prophecy came true, but not in the way anyone expected. He wasn't a hero. He was something more, a bridge between worlds. If this story moved you, if it made your heart race or your eyes tear up, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Alien Love Chronicles. Every click brings us closer to 1,000 followers and helps us continue telling these powerful, otherworldly love stories. Until the next journey, keep watching the skies.